And welcome everyone. What if I told you that over 90% of organizations still do testing manually? And over 90% of you in the room then, by definition, do testing manually. And I don't mean just executing manual tests. It's everything around your testing activities, right? So think about your regular week in your BAU, in your projects, during a release. There's a lot of activities that you do today manually, regardless if you have a test automation tool or not, right? Think of your reviewing your requirements, generating test data, generating test cases, executing a test, gathering report evidence, and ultimately, what if something fails, right? Rerunning it, defect logging, everything. I want to basically talk to you today about a new way of working from a testing perspective, a new ways of orchestrating of some of these testing activities to streamline sort of end-to-end testing activities. My name is Junaidi Loris, and today I want to basically introduce a new framework of how UiPath sort of look at this from taking a production applications into testing and how we can really streamline some of the testing activities. And I want to bring you the concept of where the challenges today is in the testing as an industry, as an overall. And hopefully you can relate to a lot of that today, where some of the applications of solutions have been helping lift some of this into a more frontier landscape, but ultimately, what is the solution going forward? I want to start with just showing an AI testing or an AI tooling landscape, right? This is very popular, I think going back to 2022, one of the probably first Gen AI tooling landscape. You can see it's very, very crowded. A lot of the topics today is about AI, Gen AI, and how it helps in testing. A more recent one on your right is around a different kind of tooling, segregated in terms of the purpose. And if you see on the bottom right, there's an agentic automation and orchestration. And UiPath is placed in that category to look at both automations, but also orchestration. And agentic is obviously weaved into a lot of the other vendors, whether that's open source, paid enterprise tools. I'm going to go into that, right? But my topic is not only about AI. It's about testing landscape, testing tools landscape. I'm sure every single one of us in the room have used one or more of this testing tool. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that it's, again, very, very crowded space, a lot of different tools for a lot of different purposes. So in summary, there is no lack of an automation tool, right? You can choose any tool that you like, and most organizations, most teams usually will have your own luxury to be able to pick and choose the tools that you use. That has its own problem right down the line, which I'll go into in a second. These statistics come from some of the leading consulting and analyst firms in terms of the impact of AI in organization. Basically, a lot of the CIOs states that AI is very much going to transform the ways of working, impact not just testing, but also eventually how they do business, right? One of the most famous quotes I've heard as well is that most CIOs believe the application of AI in testing is the way to bring AI into the workforce, because it's not customer facing, there's not a massive risks of AI doing the wrong thing. It's in a controlled environment, it's in QA, right? It's in a lower environment. This statistics of large organizations working with over 175 enterprise applications is where the traditional ways of how UiPath look at problems of addressing or integrating different applications. Very, very similar in testing. As you saw from a testing tool landscape, you're potentially using more than one different testing tool today. And I've spoken to probably some of you today that you have 3, 5 different testing tools, right, internally that you use today. one test management tool, test automation tool, performance testing tool, and so on and so forth. So the challenge is very, very similar from an enterprise applications where you're trying to make different tools like an SAP to talk to ServiceNow, to talk to Salesforce with Outlook and Excel. Testing tool has the same or similar challenges, which is what I want to cover today. And applications changes, right? Application landscape change. Lots of modern application stack have different nuances, and a lot of the organizations who's maturing their application landscapes, cloud came about. Now I think most big organizations are looking at deploying applications faster, releasing faster. Microservices is probably one of the key things as well, on top of minds. How does the testing tool fit into this whole ecosystem, right? The developers are writing codes faster with the help of AI. Do you guys keep up? Do we keep up, right? How do we keep up with software being released faster? How does tester perform their testing? So we need to sort of think about different ways of testing. Your testing strategy needs to change, but it's not always a simple tooling question. If I bring in a statistic from the Global Quality Index report from Planet from last year, a lot of us, this is from practitioners basically, test leads, test practitioners, a lot of us say automation is key driver that are going to change the way that we sort of look at testing and bring the different ROI to organization. And that's basically backed up by the different kind of tools in the landscape as well. Again, very similar. The conversations that I've been having with our customers, and you guys probably see this as well, that you've got different kind of tools for different purpose. And what it means is that you've got a lot of different tools under your umbrella, right? And one of the recent conversations I've had with a large enterprise in financial services sector has over 20 different tools, right? That's from a framework tools, an open source, something for API, something for mobile, some paid tools, basically everything under the sun that you can see. So the question now becomes, you've got a company with, say, 15 different tools, right? And each one of these does its own function just fine, right? You've got your Selenium, you've got your Playwright, you've got your open source, say, API testing to like Postman. They do things just fine, right? So there's no problem with that. Then there's a factor of which are open source, which are paid tools. What is the actual TCO, the total cost of ownership of having an open source tool, but you have to like build some framework around it? How do you actually scale it out? You got to get people who needs to know a specific language and things like that. But ultimately, the challenge is also in orchestrating them. And what I mean by that is, how do you think of bringing a test from a start to finish, especially when you think about a customer perspective, right? Put a customer lens on it. So not necessarily if I'm responsible for my web testing, I care about building system tests in my web and functional tests and things like that. And I'm happy with the outcome. I don't care if it goes to some other team down the line. I don't care what happens before. So that's someone else's problem, most often than not, right? That's a system integration test. That adds complexity. How do we make these testing tools talk to each other? Then you add AI into the mix. Again, it's different tools have their own AI. And then there's potentially some of you are already using, I know I have, a lot of the free conversational agents like ChatGPT to help me do things. But then also, how do you build an AI agent that actually get integrated into your testing lifecycle? That definitely adds complexity, right? In terms of making things work together and making the end-to-end sort of testing lifecycle streamlined. So this is an infamous quote that when I build my tests, it works. It works on my machine. It works on my dev environment. But when I'm looking at the end-to-end integration, something else breaks down the line, right? It works on my machine, but it doesn't on yours. Hey, whose problem is that? Do I even know whose problem is it, right? What happens before and after? What is the dependency? That's the integration test sort of nightmare, if you will, right? Everything is fine, like As long as my test works, it's fine. This is what we're trying to sort of put a frame around. Have a broader think of what you're doing today. Not necessarily just the testing activities, but also what are the dependencies that you're delivering at the end of the day, right? Yes, I think if we're only living in a small, isolated system test, then we should be checking the box. But ideally, we should be able to like look at a bigger picture. It doesn't have to be the end-to-end, just one up and one down, right? That's probably the things that we care about. The next team cares about their own one up and one down, and eventually you have your whole life cycle. But it's not only a tools and technology problem, right? So, like I mentioned earlier, most teams are structured differently. You've got your BAU, you've got your developers, your testers, then you got your projects. Each team has their own luxury of choosing. So it's not always about just the tool. It's about how the people are structured, the team are structured. Are you actually agile enough to sort of move it at pace, right? What about data and environment in the middle, which is one of the most critical prerequisite for automation. Without environment being up and running, without the right test data, forget about automation, right? What are we doing to ensure that we've got the right environment, the right test data to kick off test automation? So that's another very important factor. A lot of those are probably done manually to just, hey, something's not right, let's reset the environment, let's restart the environment. Okay, let's find some test data. Where do I find the test data? I need to go into the system, manually find some test data, right? Do we have the test data? Is it a production-like data that's masked, or is it a synthetic data? So a lot of these factors are important, and if we don't solve a lot of this, you're not going to have test automation, right? You have automated tests, you don't have test automation. But what's within our control, or at least the frame of mind that we can sort of think about, is the tooling, right? Yes, there's going to be an environment problem, there's going to be a data problem. We can build some sort of a framework around it, which we'll go into in a little bit. But then there's the process and people challenges, which, again, very, very separate. So what have we done to date? It's not a frontier. Challenges has been around for a long time. So what have we done to sort of resolve a lot of these challenges? That's probably one aspect, that a new person comes in, good enough role, good enough title, and say, hey, I know this person, I can buy another tool, and it's an enterprise solution that's going to solve everything. That's what happens 10 years down the line. You have 15 tools, right? We saw that already. Not saying this is a bad idea. You got to think bigger picture, right? It's not a one tool fix all problem. I don't think there's one tool that can fix every single solution. There's an automation tool, there's a test data management tool, performance testing and things like that, right? So you got to consider the broader picture. So if I think about the new, this is not even new, some of the things that have been done and talking to our customers internally, these are some of the things that has been attempted, right? To really look at streamlining some of the processes, building a pipelines, right? Just to improve or streamline processes. Whenever something happens behind the scene, all you need to know about is if all my tests pass, then I can sort of move it to the next stage and push a button for a release, right? Ideal, utopia. But for a lot of customers, there's still a forward-looking utopia. Then building a framework in place, basically having a centralized testing tool or centralized testing platform. You build a framework around it. And that usually comes with some very, very good reusability if you build it right? You got some cross-reference or cross-learning from different teams. Say, hey, if you want to test a web application, use this tool, build it this way. We can sort of try and reuse some of those things, like cross-transfer of the knowledge. So this can achieve different pockets of excellence if you sort of do it right. But at the same time, if this grows big enough, and I was speaking to some of the people earlier as well, that there's big enterprises that's very full open source, right? Building test framework is not uncommon. But then 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, the solutions architects have built a framework that's too big to maintain. Now you got to need a framework team to maintain. What if your testing strategy changes? How do you fit the new tools? What sort of additional tools or different tools that you have to consider to manage this framework? Then AI comes in. Like, how does it fit? Again, it's going to impact every one of us. If you want to be testing faster, how do we leverage AI best, right? AI is not going to fix your problem or everyone's problem. There's an infamous quote from one of the internal UiPath VP say, there's an AI agent can be deployed for every single use case, regardless if it's testing or production, but it doesn't mean that it should, right? So what is the good applications of testing, AI agents in the whole sort of testing landscape? So going back to what I said earlier, around 90% or over 90% of organizations still do testing manually. These are some of the statistics, right, from 2 different reports as well around testing activities. So again, I think manual testing is called out at 35%, but there are testing activities that are highlighted earlier that are manual, right? Before you actually run your automation script, is the test data ready? Is the environment ready? What if something fails? How do you log your defects? A lot of these other testing activities as part of understanding or even executing a test, let alone before or after execution, right? What if your test design phase? And on the right, you also see the impact of automation is very, very low. That for organizations who have actually managed to fulfill the test automation utopia, let's say. So that's where we want to bring test orchestration to really help with some of these activities. So in summary, I'd say there is no lack of automation tool problem. The lack of orchestration is the main challenge, right? And a lot of large organizations actually relate to this very much. Like, we're not here to just bring a new tool who can replace everything. We've got thousands or tens of thousands of scripts already written in product A, B, or C. Can we leverage them? Can we reuse them, right? What is the best way for us to reuse some of this? So that's where orchestration comes in. And just to give an example of a process, I take a simple loan application process, right? So me, as a person, I go to a bank's website and apply for a loan. Right? Go through pages and pages of screens, submit a loan through a website, right? Now, behind the scene, a bunch of things should happen. And as a tester, we know that we want to make sure that functionally, the web interface should work for a person to apply for a loan. But then, if I test my API in the backend or database, the loan should exist, right? The loan application ID should exist with the right amount or the right details. What about if I come in and submit additional documentation, my pay slips, change of address, right? Some KYC update. That happens in core banking, mainframe system within a bank, right? Another system. And ultimately, there is a Salesforce lead for opportunity or whatever created for that loan officer. Say, hey, Junadi, I noticed you've applied for a loan, blah, blah, blah. I'm just following up. So Salesforce lead verification is another test. So for very, very high-level tests, that's part of a, say, customer journey. And if I look at the ways of testing today, I can use one tool for my web interface testing, for functional testing. I can use another tool for API testing, the third one for mainframe, and maybe another one for Salesforce, if there's a dedicated tool, right? And every one of these will do the work just fine. So there is no problem with the system test by itself, as we all know today. The challenge is when we're looking at orchestrating them, right? We're using some of these, but also orchestrating them end to end. Hey, how do we make sure that when I want to run my tests, it starts from some customer, what sort of customer profile do I want? Do I want an 18-year-old with no job applying for, I don't know, 10 grand? Or is it like a 50-year-old with $500,000 and blah, blah, blah applying for that? What is the test data to kick off this process, right? So there are some activities even before the test execution itself that might be manual. Then the test starts, and then, as an API sort of team, I'll be like, hey, What is your test? Did it complete? I'll take your data, I'll run my test. Okay, now it's finished, I'll put it into a spreadsheet, and the next team can take the data and run the next test, right? So that's a manual handoff and some of the challenges that we see if you don't have an orchestration. You don't have visibility where things are at. Things could fail halfway, in the middle. What is the status of that particular test? How do you restart that? But yeah, a lot of different manual bottleneck challenges with people, right? How do you scale it? If you need to run this with 15 different permutations of persona, right? Like, you just think about all the permutation that needs to happen in a regression cycle. Then you've got your little post-verification or post-test execution activities on the right-hand side as well. And these are just the middle part, right? This is just the test execution part, basically. But then there is also things before or after, which is part of your test design, understanding requirements. How do you help with specific test cases, generate some test cases, test scenarios, test plan. Where do you store it? Then there's a test execution part, whether it's manual, whether it's automated, whether it's exploratory testing. Then you've got your test management or reporting analytics and things like that. So those are some of the activities that we can look at streamlining. There is a orchestration to help with execution or automation in the middle. But then there's also application of AI agents, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with, on how do we help with some of the test design and test management phase. So a quick demonstrations of how this works is got a little video here with a UiPath sort of orchestration layer, which we call Maestro. It's very easy to design a workflow. And it starts with a simple, could be a generic, generating a synthetic test data, but it can also integrate into your existing database to retrieve test data, right? Or existing TDM solution to pull the right test data in order to execute. But once it starts the first test here, we're wrapping basically a Selenium script. And you can see it's just a Selenium Runner script running in a VM somewhere, right? So UiPath here basically says, hey, I need to run a test. It's going to take however long it takes. It could be 5 minutes, it could be 10 minutes, it could be an hour. And we're just going to sit there and wait, right? So this is basically reusing what you've got with an example of Selenium. And when it's done, we'll take that data and then store it in a test data queue internally. And what it means is the next tests and the subsequent steps can reuse some of these assets that's created, right? Automatically, rather than, again, storing it in a spreadsheet separately and things like that. The second test is a backend API test, so there's no sort of user interface, but you get the idea, right? Just executing existing Postman script. It could be just a one-line command prompt. It could be actual user interface, which you saw earlier. And once it's done, then we execute the next test. So in this example, it's a little sort of mainframe automation with UiPath behind the scene. So that could be, again, any other tool that you currently use. And just bear in mind, again, UiPath can do most of this application anyway, like web, mobile, mainframe, legacy, API, and so on and so forth. But the next test executes, which is mainframe. It takes the test data from a previous one and say, here's the application, here's a customer who has submitted the application. Go and find this customer. Let's do some update of address, update of a phone number, or their contact details, right? Making sure that that's connected as an end-to-end regression test. Finally, we've got a little API/UI test. So yes, we can, again, automate testing for Salesforce. That will be both through user interface to make sure that if we click on a few buttons, the agent is going to see the loan itself, but also through API, right? Which we know we can do. So again, it doesn't have to be two separate example, but it can be just the same one. So that's a very lean, straight through, happy path test scenario. And when the test finishes, then there's some other additional activities, right? So what happens once this test is complete? So because we're wrapping around some of this tool, we can see the test results for each of this. by wrapping around the test case, you can see that we have the actual results. And for the Selenium, we just grab the whole output of the command prompt, for example, or we can go into the JSON file and just grab the output and say, can I find this assertion, right? And if so, take a screenshot, assert on it, basically got your test data proof in the same page, in the same umbrella, right? Everything now is being locked. You got your test evidence captured. If there's any screenshots that you want, you can capture it as well at different point in time, right? Different screen. I think the last one is just going to show Salesforce. Right, see, it hasn't even loaded every screen, but we've already seen what's important, which is on the top left, right? There's a particular information, the loan ID, and the amount, right? Because it's just fast. We don't have to verify everything. If we want to, we obviously can. But take a screenshot at the right time. It's like, okay, I found the loan ID, I found this amount, it's passed. So, but again, how does it work in the background? So we've got a very easy wrapper. We call it low-code sort of test wrapper. And as you can see, it's basically just calling a script. Like command line, open a command line, type this parameter, pass in the script's name, the arguments, and behind the scene, just keep waiting, right? Keep waiting. Be a matter of just reading the output, or when it finishes, or when the screen disappears, grab the output. So that's the wrapping part, right? From a low-code perspective. So there's a little interface of UiPath Studio of how to do a test automation low-code. But for the pro code or hardcore developers, we also have a way to write code in C#. Similarly, just wrapping around whatever, and then we just wait there. But is this enough? How is this different to traditional CI/CD tools, right? Hey, I can kick off a tool one way or another if everything's allowed or available via an API. I can do that today with one of my pipelines, with Jenkins, with ADO. I can kick off some test scripts automatically. So how is this different? What else can we do, right? Because what I showed you was very, very simple. So the answer is it's very, very flexible in terms of building, let's say, a test execution framework. And what I mean by that is it's a matter of drawing a diagram in the likes of Microsoft Visio or Miro. But each one of the boxes that you draw or drop on the board is actually implementable, right? And what I mean by that, again, is each one of the boxes could be a automation that runs Selenium or Playwright, third-party application. But more importantly is things that you can do outside the box that we just saw in the video, right? So if you saw, I think you saw the little synthetic test data on the left earlier, but on the right-hand side, what happens if when a whole test passes? So we can do creative things like, okay, yes, we know that there is results in the test manager interface, but what if I want to create a customized PDF report? How easy it is to build it in, right? We can build a little automation to go in there and scrape it via API and create a PDF, and then send it off to the relevant team, whether it's Teams, Slack, email, and so on and so forth. But most interestingly is what happens when something doesn't work, right? Anything that we don't execute on the bottom right here. So when something fails, we want to be able to capture it. We can capture it. What happens when your test fails? Whether it's automated or manual. Most often than not, I just retry it. And maybe it'll work the second time or the third time. Or if I know what happens, I'll just do a reset, find a different test data and rerun it, right? So if we can detect some of that, can we do some reset? If we know that a database test has failed, can we check the service? If the DB SQL server actually running, can we restart it, rerun the test? Very, very easy to do, if that's what we do today, right, for particular steps. But the retry doesn't necessarily means retry from the beginning. So we can keep a track of, okay, we've gone through the first 2, 3, 4. It failed at the fourth step. Let's do a few fixes and then retry the fourth one or fifth one. And if it works, then continue and just happy path all the way to the end, right? If there's no reset, or we can just say, yep, we've restarted or reset this environment or service, and now it works. But the most interesting thing is probably when it's not something that we know about, and what happens? You want to raise a defect. But we can then introduce agents, AI agents, to be creative about helping as a first level troubleshooter, right? So in this example, we're looking at an AI agent to help troubleshoot and diagnose what's happened when a test failed. Then we can introduce like a human in the loop to say, a test has failed, agent has found something, how do we present it to a developer? Hey, by the way, we've raised a defect as well. And if you're happy, I can log all this information into your Jira bug, right, as a defect. In addition to just the test failure, I've done a first level analysis. And if a person says, yep, that's good, how do I then look at making the change and then rerun it, right? Everything now is basically streamlined. So it's very flexible in terms of something has failed, I can raise a defect, I can raise it's environment related, I can't fix it, I'll raise a ServiceNow ticket. It's a Jira bug, I can raise a bug, right? But at the same time, how do we introduce a smart thing for it to be able to make some changes, rerun the test, and see what happens? So an example of an AI agent is that we can create, again, very, very simple. In UiPath Agent Builder, what you see is ability to be able to create an agent, give it some system prompt, and user prompt, and the user prompt will have the actual information of the test failure, for example. And we ask this agent to say, hey, your job is to help me analyze this test failure. Give me some recommendation. What is the input and output? And by the way, you have access to these tools. And these tools are what makes the agent better at doing things, right? Not just thinking, not just an LLM. With the tools, it's essentially able to then, I don't know, go into Jira, raise a ticket, go into ServiceNow, but at the same time, it also have access to like Confluence page. What is the best practice? It also have access to GitHub to be able to do a code checkout. If you give it a URL of the code, where is the source repository of the code? Then we've got finally a way to review what is the performance of your agent before you sort of deploy, right? So what are the improvements can you do in the agent? And once this is all ready, an example of what you can see with this, say, test failure analysis agent is I've created like a simple automation that fails because it's got like this hard-coded, say, duration of 10 seconds. So it's got a failure. You give that failure to this agent. You got a source code. You give the agent source code, not for it to do anything crazy, but just to display it to a person, right, to a tester or to the developer, and say, here's what I think the failure are. And here are 3-4 recommendations of what I think you can do to fix it. Now, it could be that the application or UI has changed. So yeah, we will not ever find this button, no matter how many times you change it. If I increase the time up to like 1 minute, still going to fail. But maybe one of the recommendations you see is like just to increase the hard-coded explicit wait time, right? So from here, what I can do as a person or a reviewer is that, okay, I'd like to be able to maybe try one of these changes. Click on that, click on accept or approve, and behind the scene, it can make the changes. I can have a look at the change, and then commit the change and then rerun the test, right? If I have another extension of that workflow that you saw, it can go and back and make some changes and then rerun the test. And maybe the second time will pass. So that's basically what I want to sort of show you in terms of the possibility of orchestration, not just to do automation testing on one particular environment, but also everything around before and after, right? Integrations before, what happens after. It could be as simple as, oh, yeah, I don't want to use any AI agent. Great. Let's just raise a defect automatically, right? Let's attach some of this information into my bug. Send a notification to the relevant team, all these things, which are not straightforward for a, say, simple CI/CD tools, right? Pipeline tools. So yeah, that's pretty much what I want to talk about today. The journey from a UiPath into agentic automation, orchestration, and agentic testing has come a long way. Like we've done this a long time in production automation space, and we're bringing the tool called Test Cloud into testing, right? But with the same underlying environment, governance, security, and automation. I'll wrap it up there, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Junaidi. Such a great information showing the implementation of Agentic AI in the test automation. Good to learn about these things. Considering the time, it's almost about the lunch as well. We'll take only 2 questions at max. So any question from anyone?
Pro-code C#, like the underlying capability of UiPath written in sort of Microsoft.NET. So yeah, we start with this freebie support and with introduction of Pro-code, like we basically crowdsource this idea to our community, which is over 2-3 million people. What are the most popular language? We don't have all options. Like C# is one of the most common, and we brought it in. But at the same time, you also have ability to invoke third-party codes, like invoke JS, invoke Python, invoke other things built into the low code. So you can invoke a code, bring in a third-party scripts. But if you want to write in UiPath, it will be C#.
So question regarding full journey you have showed on the orchestration. But what if I get a big change or big release? Do I need to go in each and every screens in no-code approach and update everything, or I can prompt AI saying that, okay, this has changed, please update my workflow?
I would say we're probably a bit far away from that second phase that you're talking about. Today, I would say what we can do with AI is like do 2 things. One is there's a change in the requirements. We can get AI to review requirements and review the existing test cases, say which one needs to change. We'll probably give you a recommendation. But to make the actual change, it will probably be like a combination of a developer with the AI tool itself, just to say, hey, these are the changes or the test cases that needs to be updated, but what screen needs to change, for example, right? Like maybe a new checkbox has been introduced in this screen, and if you don't take it, you can't click submit. The AI, like I don't think AI agent can just, okay, I know to insert a particular click activity to make sure your task case has passed. But from a UiPath standpoint, or any other tool, you know where the failures are, so you know like to insert a change or update into the test script so that you don't actually go into every single screen, you just fix where the failures are, essentially.
Because for us, the main issue what we face is UI gets changed a lot, and elements get changed a lot, and there is a maintenance overhead. So that's why I was asking.
Yeah, I think a good sort of side things that we're also working on is what we call like an agentic UI, where you're not actually building a script or step-by-step to say, click here, fill in these blanks, but you give it like a high-level prompt, like just fill in this information and then click submit. So it's basically like computer use or operator, right? Where you just prompt it and it'll try and find out which button do I click to enter to proceed. So I think UI agent is going to be to be able to address that sort of thing. UI changes, unexpected pop-up, self-healing execution. That's something that sort of can address that. But if you're building deterministic scripts, it will not be able to fix it. But if you just give it a high-level instruction, here's a screen, fill in this information, and then click submit, then it will be able to like dynamically adapt, right?
Thank you, everyone.